Today, I'm going to show you how to put an OEM Tudor clasp on an aftermarket Uncle Seiko Jubilee bracelet. Let's go.
I got the cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gonna live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, doing no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad, yeah. Baby, I'm bad.
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that. I ain't gonna wait, that's all fact. Give me one shot and I'll never get the throne.
So several months ago, I swapped out my OEM Tudor bracelet and instead opted for an Uncle Seiko Jubilee bracelet for my Tudor Black Bay GMT. Now my reasons for doing this was primarily for the comfort and for the aesthetic. So a couple things that I disliked about the OEM Tudor bracelets. Number one was the lack of articulation. It really just did not conform to my wrist very well, and therefore it wasn't the most comfortable bracelet. And number two, I didn't really care for the faux rivets, but it wasn't as much just the faux rivets that are along the side. It's also this like faux base plate. So if it was just a simple 3-link oyster style bracelet links, maybe that wouldn't have looked as bad. But ultimately I just wasn't a real fan of the faux rivets or the faux base plate that doesn't really hold the links together. So I started shopping around for different alternatives and I came across the Uncle Seiko brushed Jubilee. And this one actually corrected some of those issues. Number one, it being a Jubilee bracelet, it articulates really well and does a really good job just wrapping around the wrist. And then also this Jubilee doesn't have any faux rivets on the sides. I think that the fully brushed bracelet maintains that tool watch aesthetic. And I also think it adds a little bit of uniqueness because it doesn't look the exact same as all the other Tudor Black Bay GMTs out there. And now there are some things that aren't quite as good on the Uncle Seiko bracelet. After all, the Uncle Seiko bracelet only cost about $130, whereas the Tudor bracelets cost upwards of almost $800. Another thing that kind of bothers me about the Uncle Seiko bracelet is the Uncle Seiko branding on the back of the clasp. So I kind of subscribe to the idea that, hey, it's your watch, you can do with it what you want. But even if I'm getting an aftermarket bracelet, I want it to still look like it belongs on the watch. I'd rather it to look like an OEM piece. And so I do have a bit of a pet peeve when brands put their own brand logos prominently on the clasps of watches. I'd much rather have an aftermarket bracelet that just has no logo on it, or maybe get a bracelet that is able to accommodate the OEM clasp. So one of the cool things that Uncle Seiko's done is they have manufactured a link that allows you to put the Uncle Seiko Jubilee bracelet on the Tudor OEM clasp. So now we're going to switch perspectives. I'm going to unbox the Uncle Seiko modification link, and I'll show you step by step how to put the Tudor clasp on the Uncle Seiko bracelet. All right, so before I go through the unboxing, I just kind of want to give you another perspective of this Tudor OEM bracelet and what I was referring to about one of my dislikes about it. Is you can kind of see on the sides where these faux rivets are, that there's this like faux rivet metal plate that just takes away from the aesthetic when you're looking at the bracelet. I just find that faux rivet plate to be a little bit distracting. And personally, I kind of feel that the riveted bracelets should probably just stay in the past where they belong. Now with the Tudor clasp, I actually do find it to be a high quality clasp. I like the way that it looks. I like the way that the safety clasp works. I can't tell if it's a ceramic or polymer detent balls. I think work really well on it. And so ultimately, I want the OEM Tudor clasp look to replace this Uncle Seiko branded bracelet. Nothing against Uncle Seiko. I think they deliver a good product for the price, but I just don't really like having that Uncle Seiko U on the back of a Tudor branded watch head. So while I think by putting this clasp on the back of this bracelet will look better, but I do honestly worry if the Tudor clasp is going to be less comfortable than the Uncle Seiko clasp. And the reason being, I kind of think that there are 3 real main measurements that lend to a more comfortable clasp. The first measurement is how wide the clasp is. This Tudor OEM clasp is about 20 millimeters wide. The Uncle Seiko clasp is about 20 millimeters wide as well. Another measurement that lends to comfortability is how thick or how tall the clasp sits on your wrist. The Uncle Seiko comes in at about 6.8 millimeters tall, whereas the OEM Tudor clasp comes in thinner at 6.3 millimeters tall. The next measurement that I think lends to comfortability is how long the clasp system is. On the Uncle Seiko, the entire clasp system sits at about 42, 43 millimeters long, which is nice and compact, whereas the Tudor clasp system comes in at a whopping about 56 millimeters long, which that is a really long clasp system. When you think about it, even the Tudor GMT watch head itself only has about a 50 millimeter lug-to-lug length. So the clasp on the Tudor is actually longer than the watch head itself, which I don't think lends to the most comfortable wearing experience. So on the one hand, I think I'll prefer the look and the quality of the Tudor clasp, but I do worry that the clasp length itself might make the wearing experience a little bit less comfortable. But with that said, I'm still willing to give it a try. So let's go to the unpackaging. So inside, looks like they sent me an extra pen. Kind of cool. Have some stickers, so some free swag. And then this is the piece that will allow us to put this Uncle Seiko Jubilee on the Tudor clasp. So inside this one, looks like they just have the end link and then a couple of split pins for the Uncle Seiko bracelet. Now the Uncle Seiko bracelet only costs 130 bucks. It does not have screw-in pins for the bracelet links. It does have just these split pins, whereas the OEM Tudor bracelet, being more expensive, does have screw-in pins to hold the links together. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the Uncle Seiko clasp, and I'll just use a simple push pin to press the spring bar inside the clasp and take that side off. And then on the other side, uses a push pin system. So I will need my block and my mallet. And so with these split pins, you always want to push in the direction of the arrow. Pull that split pin out, and then the clasp falls freely. And now next I'm going to remove the Tudor clasp. And the way that the Tudor OEM clasp comes off is I will have to push out the spring bar inside the clasp. Once you depress that spring, it will allow you to take off the bracelet. And now on the other side, there's another spring bar that holds this safety clasp on, and you have to get the safety clasp off to be able to take that spring bar out. So my normal push pin is a little bit too big for this, so I'm actually going to use like a little safety pin, which has a smaller needle head. So I'm going to push down the spring bar right there, which will then allow me to take this safety clasp off. All right, so that spring bar is right there, so I just needed to press this down and then take that safety clasp off. And then that's the spring bar that we needed to get out in order to take this portion of the bracelet off. And now this Uncle Seiko Jubilee link should fit the Tudor clasps that are 10 millimeters wide. So you'll see the spacing right between here is about 10 millimeters. So I'll kind of reverse that process in order to get this link, this end link on. So I'll put that Jubilee piece in. I'll insert that spring bar. And now I have to put the safety clasp back on. I usually can just use my fingernail to get these on, and there you go. Now once that's on, I'm going to have to install this. So when you're installing these split pins, you want to push now toward the arrow, not away from it, and you want to insert the folded end of the split pin first. And then I'm going to use my block to tap it in. And now when I'm tapping the pins, I'll use the plastic or polymer side of my mallet. And then I will use this pin tool, just give it a couple taps to fully seat it inside the end of the bracelet. And now on the other side, we are going to put the spring bar back in here, and then put this into the clasp. And there we go. Yeah, so there you have it. We have the OEM Tudor clasp installed on the Uncle Seiko Jubilee bracelet. All right, fellas, that is a step-by-step tutorial on how to install the Tudor OEM clasp on the Uncle Seiko Jubilee for your Tudor Black Bay watches. Overall, I'm finding this setup to be more comfortable and better aesthetically than the OEM Tudor bracelet. If you've made it this far into the video and you found some value in it, please do me a favor and subscribe. And remember guys, it doesn't matter if you only wear OEM bracelets or you're okay with aftermarket bracelets, as long as you wear your watches.
You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy.